extending care at home, which is a very important topic and a very popular one. A lot of you have asked me about this, and I'm so happy to see some very familiar faces. You know, one of my goals for our seminars is to be able to create a sense of community, and for all of you to be able to look around and see that you're not alone in this process. It's a very important set of issues that we all will be going through at one point or the other. And so being able to share ideas and learn from each other is a big part of this. Now, I always have to start with just, this is a required thing for me to acknowledge that the Elderly Affairs Division is sponsoring this event, and I thank them very much. This seminar and our seminar series is being funded by a federal Older Americans Act, and it's been a really, hopefully you'll find that it's a very valuable experience. I just want to also acknowledge the past so many seminars, my cameraman, Jonathan Keao. If you ever need camera services or, for events or whatever, he's been very good. Thank you, Jonathan. Also, you were checked in for today with by Dr. Derek Pang, who's, some of you had said he looks like me, and he's not my father, but he is my uncle. And that's enough. And for decades, he always says, "You're my twin, you're my little," when I was a little child. And finally, it's starting to become the case that we look like each other. But he's an esteemed cardiologist, retired now. He's also part of something called the Dancing Doctors. I don't know if any of you are in the medical field, but they, these physicians all have been dancing, dressing up in costume and dancing every Halloween for like the last 40 years. They have a performance over in Nu'uanu. He's also a senior, so part of why I have him here too today is so that he can learn about this topic. And I'm glad that he's here because I decided to use quite a few personal experiences as examples in this. And so he might find that kind of tickling. And then lastly, I just want to acknowledge, of course, between the last seminar and today, we've had a big tragedy on Maui and in Lahaina. And just want to acknowledge everyone who's been affected by that. I mean, I think there's, in some way, we will all be affected by that, everyone in our state, but especially for the people at Ground Zero. And as it relates to today's topic, it's the devastation, and they're no longer even having this conversation. It's much more of a basic needs kind of thing. Now, many of you have already attended my seminars, but for some of you who have not, this is the first time. A little bit about me. I took over my family's care home, senior care home in Manoa back in 2011. And at that time, I had come from the travel industry, living abroad. But in 2011, I took over this very different business and have learned quite a bit over the years. And I noticed that there was a huge need for information. There was a big gap in awareness about senior care. And so 2 years later, I started just presenting about, what is senior care, what are the options out there, and have been doing that now for 10 years, but it's evolved into this Kupuna Care Pair, which you're here today for, but also a bunch of services that I have online. So I have a few years under my belt in terms of this space, but I'm constantly learning more every day about it. And today, as I mentioned, is our last seminar of a series from 2023 or for 2023. The previous topics have been all really different. For one, they're all kind of standalone, but they're also connected. And so I do see some familiar faces who have endured and pushed ahead through our whole series. I've got certificates for you for those of you who have gone through each one of our seminars. I see Nita and Joanne and Chris and Robert and some of you online too. So I'm going to give you these after. But keep an eye out for, I'm going to come out with a schedule for 2024. And hopefully Elderly Affairs Division, chooses to continue our seminars. But more information will come. Now, one thing I like to stress in these seminars is that I'm here to hopefully help you figure out how to think about this and not have to reinvent the wheel when it comes to planning for the future or understanding what's out there. I it's a big passion of mine to help people sort of guide you into thinking, well, this new experience that I'm having, how can I go about, enduring that? And so I always say, though, that I'm providing a framework today, but the real homework comes after, when you have to think about your individual situations and what will work best for you. As you know, senior care and providing care for loved ones has been really, it's a very costly decision. It can be a very costly decision. It can also be a very consequential one, as I like to say. And it's, I'm sorry, somebody is asking me about screen sharing. A very consequential decision that is, we're talking life and death sometimes, right? And so, as I mentioned, we're not alone in this. We're all here to support each other. And hopefully this community that we've kind of created, especially for my VIP, whatever you want to call each other, frequent attendees, you can learn to sort of support each other through this process. But help is available after these seminars as well. Now, all of us, to some degree, really, really want to just stay at home, right? It's for many different reasons. Seniors want to age in place is the term that you might hear thrown around, which means staying at home through receiving long-term care and hopefully maybe even being able to pass at home. But there's many reasons why that's not really applicable or suitable, and it could even be a bad idea. And so what we'll talk about is how to safely extend whatever time you have at home, be it for yourself or for a loved one, figuring out when it's time to actually move on. And then several people have come to me. This is actually the second most common question I receive, is how do I get my dad out of the house to move into a care facility? Or mom really just doesn't want to leave. She feels comfortable at home, right? And so there's some strategies and tips that I'm going to provide, but it is a very big challenge at times. Now, as many of you know, I like to come up with little quizzes on my seminars. So this is a real quick and easy one. Get the blood flowing and get a little break the ice, warm up, because we're going to have an interactive session today. Now, show of hands, tell me which one of these is the hardest about staying at home for senior care or being cared for at home. Who thinks A, the cost? Okay, I see no hands already. B, keeping safe, staying active, fighting loneliness. C, coordinating caregivers, moving out. Oh, coordinating caregivers, I see show of hands. That is a hard one. Finally, moving out a senior, E or F. Okay, they're all difficult. Yes, okay. That was an easy, softball for you. But they're all very difficult challenges, and yet they are present for everybody in some degree when they start to experience decline, or maybe for their loved one, they start to notice that, gosh, this is requiring a little bit more of either my time or my energy or something else. So help me to fill in the blanks here. There is no place like home. Home is where the heart is. Take me home, country roads. Home is the nicest word there is. Well, these are very common sayings that we have. And by the way, if you ever are helping somebody living with dementia, you can really do these sorts of exercises and they can get it really quickly sometimes. But home is a very important topic for us, and it's a very meaningful thing, and I'm going to get into that. But the emotions and the benefits of home are usually very clear to all of us. So this may seem obvious, but some of the potential upsides, the good things about staying at home while receiving senior care are, one, it's familiar. It's comfortable. I'm going to take the example or use the example for my own grandmother. And she lived in her house for, gosh, I don't know, 60 years maybe. I mean, that's comfortable. That's familiar to her, right? She was very comfortable there. And she really wanted to stay at home for her care, and she wanted to pass at home. And fortunately, she was able to be able to do that. We had lots of great memories in this space. And, I'm like one of the younger grandchildren in the family. So I was very little, but, the Sunday dinners or the Christmas parties, home is usually where we have very meaningful events, traditions, gatherings between people who are important to ourselves, right? So it's a great venue and an important venue for that. It may be an upside, maybe it's a downside according to your situation, but living with family, being together with them and that companionship can be a really big plus, and usually it is. Now, some people feel like it's a challenge for their care, and vice versa, their spouses or their loved ones, but usually family is very helpful in this situation. And one of the biggest thing about home care or care at home and the benefits, which you may not realize, is that you have the ultimate flexibility to do whatever you want. You want to walk around naked all day, you can at home, right? You want to tell the caregiver that I want you to sort every single color of the M&Ms, they'll do it for you because that's your home and you're the boss at home, right? But this can also be a little problematic later on in life. So I'm going to go into that. But generally, I think we all understand the benefits of being at home and the reasons why we want to stay at home. But each of you have a different background and are here for different reasons. And so some of the common attributes when it comes to everybody, seniors living at home, today we have a diverse group, is one of the key things, the distinctions is a senior independent or dependent on other people? And we're going to have different strategies and feedback based on this. So if you're independent, meaning you're kind of able-bodied, maybe you live by yourself or with some family and you don't need care, then some seniors have family support. Maybe their kids are here, maybe their sister lives in town, maybe there's somebody who can help them. And some seniors don't have family support. They're still independent and living on their own. Maybe they're in their 60s or 70s, but there's nobody that they can really turn to rely on. And so the strategies for these different groups are going to vary depending on their needs. For dependent seniors, sometimes they rely on family to care for them, provide hands-on assistance, and sometimes they have that assistance through professional caregivers. So, and then there's different issues. These are only 3 of them, but some seniors live with dementia or Alzheimer's disease and a related dementia. Some seniors have mobility issues where they're not able to get around the house as well anymore. And seniors have medical issues where something may be a limiting reason why they can stay. So for our group today, I just want to have a show of hands here so that we kind of get a sense of where we all stand. Who is here just to be planning for your own care in the future only? You don't have a senior at home or anything like that. So look around. I mean, like, we have maybe, I don't know, like 20% or so that you're here to prepare for yourself and you're independent. Now, who here is here, here today because you have a senior at home that you're having to accommodate or care for? Okay, so a few more. Now, of those people who have a senior at home, anybody having to work with Alzheimer's disease or related dementia? A few people. Okay. Anyone senior have mobility issues that might make it kind of risky at home? Okay, so we're seeing some themes here, right? And then anyone seniors have healthcare issues that are either present now or maybe become a problem in the future, right? So this is a good group and a diverse range of needs that we all have, but we're going to come together with strategies. And the key thing is that, depending on what I call the care period, the strategies will differ. Now, my grandmother, like I mentioned, she lived in her house till 60 years or so. She lived in her house. She was mostly independent. Luckily, she had some health issues, but not until the very end. So she was generally independent, and she lived till about 90 years old. So that is her profile. She didn't really need a lot of care. Sometimes she'd have like somebody come in and do a little bit of housework. So she could pay for that. But she also had a big family to support her. And so what we did for her care may not actually be applicable to others. And so therefore, we want to make sure that we get a diverse range of perspectives today. I want to now give you the framework for how we extend this care at home, right? It's a 6-step process, and it's on your paper, so don't feel like you have to furiously jot down notes. But as mentioned in the other seminars, you know, these 6 steps, we tend to kind of do in our heads, even just intuitively. So don't feel like you have to, you know, to the T, follow every step. However, some things are good to kind of get down on paper, you know, because there's so many issues at times and factors involved that it's hard to just keep in our head and try to, you know, work out in our minds. So while these 6 steps may seem a little bit intimidating, just know that for many of you, it's for me too, all of us to some degree can just sort of intuitively think this through. I don't want you to be intimidated by it. But we'll go through the first 6 steps here. And the first one is actually kind of a recap. I know many of you attended my seminar on care priorities, but it's part of this process. So what I call the care period is really the period of time. How many days, how many weeks, how many months would it be applicable for you to find one type of care before you have to change the whole plan, right? There's triggers that we all go through in life. Triggers could be birth of a child, getting married, getting a job, or getting fired, but also for senior care, right? A lot of common triggers could be death of a spouse, maybe healthcare issues arise, maybe I have to think about budget. You know, I have one person who's looking for care right now who her whole life was in Lahaina, and all her property and businesses and everything it was in Lahaina. And so now this care period for her is very quickly ending because her ability to pay for care is throwing her into a new care period. And so a care period could be days or months or weeks or years, but it's a period of time where nothing's going to really change. And then some trigger occurs that now I have to change my plan, right? It's important to know that because sometimes when we think about, oh, I got to take care of dad, we tend to think it's going to be forever in one way. Now, that could be a good thing. You know, maybe I just think it's so simple to do that, but it could also be a bad thing because maybe I'm unprepared for changes that are going to occur. So it's really important for you to know, I mean, we don't have a crystal ball, but it's important for you to kind of sketch out how long am I going to be able to use this plan that I'm coming up with? If I'm at home and I'm relying on my wife to do all the cooking and cleaning and care for me, what would happen if she suddenly falls ill or needs care? That's going to change the care period and the time that I can rely on her, right? That's kind of an example of it. So first of all, you want to know how long you're looking at this situation. And in this presentation, we're talking about care at home. So realistically, for the senior that you're looking at, or for those of you who are planning for your own future, realistically, can you envision how long that's going to last? And what might be some of the triggers that are going to throw you into another care period? Because as much as as much as you can, it's good to kind of break up the indefinite timeline into more manageable chunks, and then you can plan ahead. So define the care period. If you want to learn more about this, I have, the presentation I did in June, determining your key care priorities. That's all the recordings online, so you can watch that. Once you know your care period, where you're going to stay at home, or your mom is going to stay at home, and maybe your sisters and you are taking care of mom at home right now. Once you kind of anticipate that that's going to last maybe, let's say, at most 2 to 3 years because mom is a certain age or it's a certain condition, then you can just only plan for that one time. And I should say that some conditions, as tragic as they are, have a little silver lining to it, like say dementia, Parkinson's disease, any sort of neurodegenerative diseases. Those are horrible conditions, but they do sort of follow a trajectory that is known. And so that can sort of help you define the care period. If your loved one has Parkinson's at home, you'll know that eventually mobility becomes an issue, swallowing becomes an issue, speech or cognition becomes an issue. And so therefore you can use that to sort of plan ahead. Okay, once you define how long you're looking at staying at home or your senior staying at home, then you have to really qualify, is staying at home a good idea? Is it a bad idea? How should we do this, right? And so in that same presentation I did in June, we talked about care priorities. And I wanted to recap this because this is an important concept. The priority that we're talking about is me personally, I want to stay at home for care. Or my senior, my loved one wants to stay at home for care. Now you ask yourself these three questions. Is it really critical for any one of those people, myself or my senior or the spouse or whomever, is it really, really critical to stay at home for care, for their well-being, emotionally, physically, spiritually, whatever? Then you also ask yourself, is it going to be safe to stay at home? And if it's not safe immediately, are there steps that we could take to make it safe? Like dad, gets up in the middle of night and he needs to pee, but there's nobody there to help him. Well, we could make that safer by having a caregiver with him overnight. But will it be safe at home? And then the third one is, can we really afford it for this care period? So again, if you know that mom is 97 and she has congestive heart failure, then her care period is probably going to be shorter. We're not talking 5, 10 years. We may be talking 2 to 3 years. But with that care period, can we afford for mom to stay at home, right? So you ask yourself these three questions. And if the answer isn't yes to all of them, then you really need to wonder, this might not be an ideal situation for mom or for yourself because of very basic, important needs that we have in terms of the care priorities. Some families, again, will prioritize that up front and take a risk later that at 97, mom may run out of funding by 98 or 99, but she's lived a long life. She has a health condition that may shorten that life. So we'll take a chance to pay more now, and then we'll deal with the risk or the fallout later. So once you define how long we're talking about staying at home, and then the qualifying, is this realistic for us to stay at home? Then you start looking at the third thing, which is about risk. I'm going to take a quick moment to break from all of those words. I'm going to show you this picture of my grandmother's house. Now, it's notable. I mean, you don't even see the house, really. What you see there is a mango tree. My grandmother, in her wisdom, in her mid-80s, decided that she wanted to go pick her mangoes one day. And so she climbed her mango tree in her 80s. She climbed it. She got some mangoes, and she fell from her mango tree and broke her leg. She had to, the door of the house is where I'm standing now. So she had to crawl her way all the way back to the house, get onto the phone, not to this uncle, to a different uncle. And the phone was one of these old style, it's on the wall, like 50 inches up. So she had to climb her way up, pick up the phone, dial my uncle. She said, Meredith, I need to go to the hospital. And don't pick me up for another half an hour because I have to put on a face. And that was important to her, that she looked good. And she was a very glamorous woman, I have to say. She always was very well put together, even through pain and through health issues like that. But that's a risk, right? How can we mitigate risk when you're looking at staying at home? There's many types of risks, and we're going to talk about that right now, right? Home's a great venue for memories, good memories, right? That's like a legendary memory in my family. I don't know how she recovered from that broken leg and lived on for another 5, 8 years after that. But common risks, and risks that vary according to our different conditions, are kind of, right, these are some of the top ones. Now, hazards like maybe having a tempting mango tree there, having steps in the home, having dogs or pets that get in the way as you're walking, right? There's many types of physical hazards that can get in the way. And really, another one that sometimes people don't tend to think about is poor maintenance of your home. Now, if a senior is living at home by themselves, oftentimes it's difficult to maintain the space. Even, I mean, we're talking wiping down countertops, but even sweeping or throwing out the trash, and suddenly living at home becomes this overwhelming task that can become hazardous, right? So we need to really mitigate some of these physical hazards. Wheelchairs, if anyone's ever, had a wheelchair at home, wheelchairs will destroy drywall. It will destroy baseboards. In my care home, we always end up with these wheelchairs that, somebody is turning the corner and the drywall corner bead just gets destroyed, right? Like, these things happen through aging. So it's important to look at, are there hazards to this that's going to make living at home difficult? Another kind of not so thought about one is boredom. That really affects seniors. And what goes along with that is loneliness. So this is common kind of almost to everybody, or a risk that's common to everybody, that maybe there's boredom involved. Unless a senior is living with family, there might not be a lot of people to talk to, right? And even if there are people to talk to at home, we get into our routines. We get into, I'm not even a senior, but there's days where between my two kids and my work and all of this, I don't even know if I even talk to my wife. We're kind of just on autopilot, right? And so imagine, like, and as many of you probably have heard, the risk of loneliness is huge for seniors, and boredom. And so it's a real factor in decline. It's also very costly. Now, I'll talk a little bit more about prices. But having care at home 24 hours a day, if you're paying somebody, is really, really, really expensive for that around-the-clock care. I always have this calculation, but the minimum wage actually went up, so I had to change the calculation. The minimum wage is now $12 an hour. No caregiver in the state is going to work for $12 an hour. But as an example, if you have 24 hours a day, every day, 365 days a year of care at $12 an hour, that's over $8,700 a month right there. And so staying at home for all of those wonderful things we talked about can also be really expensive as somebody needs more assistance, right? And so there's other costs too, not just the monetary cost. There's a cost of relationship to my children, goodwill between the family or spouses that are caring for me at home. There's utilities, there's food, there's all sorts of other, monetary and non-monetary and intangible costs involved with staying at home. So those are common risks. Now, according to some people who have different conditions, even if somebody's not living with dementia, like dehydration is actually kind of common for seniors. Lack of self-care, lack of enough calories and food intake happens quite frequently. Just poor self-care, and it's hard, to think of all these things, maintaining the home, but then doing all this other stuff, or maybe even taking care of some grandkids. Oh, by the way, I got to drink some water right now. Sometimes a day just goes by and we forget, right? But also some seniors who are living with dementia, they're not even able to remember, or there's no cue in their brain that they are thirsty. So how do we mitigate that risk? That's going to be important. Another one that some families tend not to think about is about routine. At a care home, at my care home, my residents just live by a routine. And it's not like upfront in their face, but it's every day they can rely on knowing that breakfast will be at a certain time. They know that we do after breakfast, at this sort of time, we have group activities. Then I have lunch, then I can take a nap, then there's more group activities and exercise and dinner. Like it just kind of goes on, right? And they don't have to think about this. But for seniors at home, it's you're responsible to come up with this routine. And whether or not that routine is actually healthy is a whole nother separate thing. Some seniors will tell me, oh, I have a routine. I'll get up, I'll make some breakfast, then I watch the morning shows, then I have a drink, and then I'll watch the other shows. And then basically it's just TV all day. That's the routine. And it is true, it is a routine, but it's not a very healthy routine that's going to lead towards extending this time at home. And so I'm sorry, I'm skipped ahead here, but inconsistent routines are a real challenge. And as we age, it becomes more and more important. Now, the one I skipped ahead here is inadequate or inconsistent support. If I have my parents at home and they're relying on me to provide care for them on a Saturday morning, I'm going to say, well, I'm talking to all of you, and I'd much rather do that. Or, if I rely on my kids to care for me at home, they may have work. They may have their own families. And so being able to show up and help out at the same time when I have routines can be a big challenge. Even if people hire professionals, professional caregivers, home care agencies have a big staffing issue. And if I'm not hiring somebody basically full time, they have to find other work. And so one of the very common complaints about home care agencies, and I'll talk about that, is that the caregivers maybe don't show up, or maybe every week it's a different caregiver, or not even every week, maybe every day it's a different caregiver. And so that routine that I'm learning to live by and I really need for my care is inconsistent, or it's not able to be supported by the inconsistent support that I'm receiving at home. Lastly is burnout, caregiver burnout. I know some of you raised your hand that you are working, with a loved one at home, and maybe even a loved one who's living with dementia. You will attest, I'm sure, that it's a challenge. It's a challenge. I mean, I have a young baby at home. Even taking care of a young baby is a challenge. Not even, and the young baby can't verbalize to me that I overcooked the food, or that I'm stupid, or you didn't do this for me, or you're such a bad son, or whatever comes out of some people's mouths. My baby just screams, and then I know it's either poop or, feeding or sleep. That's so simple, but it takes a lot of work, right? And so for a human to take care of another human, it's costly in many ways, monetarily, non-monetarily ways. And it's costly for a human to take care of another human in our energy and our commitment to that. So families often burn out. And a result of all of this can be decline in health. It can be boredom that will lead to issues. It can be a big one, actually, is that seniors will be up all night and then they'll sleep during the day. And having that switch kind of day-night routine can be really challenging because they're unable to participate in social activities. They're up all night instead, right? There's all sorts of things that can happen: injury, illness, just general decline, and even sometimes premature death. Somebody passes on or declines too quickly when really there may have been some other solutions for them. So these are very common risks, and it's important to be able to mitigate them. Okay, well, we're gonna actually have an exercise about that. But the fourth step out of the, I think it's 6 here, is to look at holistic needs. And we have to meet them adequately enough in every sort of way. So, there's some very basic needs like safety. We talked about hazards. I don't remember what my family did about the mango tree after. I think, my grandmother could conceptualize, okay, we're not going to climb mango trees anymore. But for other people, safety hazards are just less obvious. But safety and comfort, those are very important ones. Activities of daily living, so just your day-to-day care needs like eating, bathing, ambulating, taking, I can't remember the other 5 right now, but these are very basic needs that all have to be met if you're going to stay at home. We talked about routines and how important they are. There has to be some degree of companionship. We are social creatures, and we need to have some form of socializing and stimulation. And hopefully the quality of it is good, but even if, even at the care home, if I have seniors who sit in the back. They don't want to participate in the group activities, and they just complain about all these other people. That's a nice activity for them. They can feel like they're high up on the mountaintop and saying, I'm in this home with all these old people. And it's a fun thing, even if they're being kind of demeaning. And sometimes they speak so loudly that others can hear them. But that passive participation speaks volumes for seniors, even if they're just far off or just watching from a distance, right? You don't have that same kind of opportunity at home, unfortunately. Unless, maybe the senior is living with family, there's grandkids or great grandkids, but companionship is so important. Now, you may have heard that purpose is also very important to all of us. It's important to feel like we're needed. It's important to feel like we have, why are we here living so long? And seniors in my home, oftentimes that purpose may be that they no longer have purpose of work. And sometimes they feel like they have no purpose for their families, but their families will step in and say, Mom, we need you to engage with the grandkids, or we need you to help me with this situation. I want to know your opinion, or tell me about our family's legacy. Everyone needs to feel like they're here for some reason. And so meeting that need is important. One last one, which you may not be kind of familiar with, is traditions. And that's something that I haven't introduced in my other seminars. Traditions, to me, meaning the act of people doing things together that kind of is self-serving. Like, we have like holidays. Holidays are a tradition, holiday gatherings, right? The fact that everyone gets together for holidays, even if they argue with each other or if they don't really like each other, but the fact that they get together is a tradition. And it adds to one's identity that I'm part of this family, or I'm part of a group of people, or I belong generally, right? And so traditions are really important to maintain. One of the things that less active, maybe I'm less mobile, maybe I get around in a wheelchair, so I can't make it to all those family parties. But maintaining some tradition and or creating new traditions is really, really important for seniors who are living at home, and generally for all of us, because otherwise we feel kind of lost or floating through life. And I know that some of you here who have registered are living on your own, without family, without support, any formal support. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. But basically, one of the key things for somebody living alone without a lot of family support is that you have to find new traditions in this process. And even for people who do have family, creating these traditions that are social bonds that establish some sort of identity for the senior is so important. You look at, there's social studies about this, or even people go online, right? A lot of younger people will go on the internet to find their community or to feel like they belong to a group of people because they're not getting it offline. Okay, so meeting holistic needs. Then the next one is to supplement the care as needed. I have a whole long list here of organizations and services. It's on your handout, and for those of you on Zoom, that will be available as well. Now, there's a lot of services out there that can support seniors living at home and support seniors generally. Shout out to Elderly Affairs Division, which is part of Honolulu City and County, for having this program, having a lot of other programs, but that's an important one. There's media out there, Generations Magazine and Kupuna Wiki. Give Me a Break is an organization for caregivers who are caring for somebody else at home, to care for the caregivers. Home Sharing Hawaii, Nicole had brought some flyers that are back there. Home Sharing Hawaii is if you have a senior who doesn't have their own home, a senior who doesn't have their own home, or maybe they do, but they're lonely, they can actually kind of be senior roommates with another person who does have a home, and they can have those traditions, that companionship, even maybe hire somebody to do a little care for them. Of course, big ones like Parkinson's associations, the Caregiver Foundation is like they do all kinds of stuff, legal help as well. AARP, YMCA, Gym Guys, and there's some others. The like Mo'iliili Community Center and the community centers, they have senior exercise, right? Adult daycare programs. I'm going to talk about that shortly. Now, there's dementia support for people who are preparing for their loved one at home to kind of decline or stay at home, right? And Alzheimer's Association is really big. Catholic Charities does a lot of educational seminars through Elderly Affairs Division. Tipa Snow is like she's from the mainland, as is Rachel Wonderland, but in my care home we rely on their concepts quite a bit. They're kind of big, especially Tipa Snow. She's like the godmother of dementia care. And then YouTube, you may not realize, but there is just like a ton of information on YouTube about, if you just Google anything, how do I fix my car? How do I install a TV? How do I help to convince a senior to eat when they don't want to eat? Like these gerontologists around the world will come up with these short videos that are very useful, maybe 5-10 minute videos. And so YouTube's a great spot for that. I'm going to just call out this young lady at the very back here, Tani Kagesa, who's our state's first and only director on dementia. I can't recall the title, but Tani back there works for Executive Office on Aging through the governor's office, and she's developing a strategic plan for the state and looking at coordinating services, right? So there are services available. Other support services, the community centers I mentioned. If you have trouble getting meals or cooking, there's many organizations that actually deliver meals to homes. I even do that at my care home so that my caregivers can just focus on care instead of having to be a restaurant. There's ministries, Kupuna ministries at different churches that gather and they can support each other. And then this one is kind of to come, but like Kupuna Care Pair, when people have difficulty finding transportation, that's one space that I'm going to be applying my efforts to, being able to help seniors find wheelchair transportation quickly and not have to search all around for it. So you can supplement with these. I will send up follow-up information with links, and you can just kind of go to their websites. And there's so many more out there. But the main thing is, don't think that you need to be alone caring for somebody at home, right? There's many services out there. And some examples, okay, if you need help for somebody to actually provide hands-on assistance, there is licensed home care agencies. Now, somebody asked me about cost. They're typically charging quite a bit, maybe at the very minimum right now, about $22 an hour to $35 an hour. That's much higher than the 12 I mentioned, right? So if you're paying it for 24 hours a day, then that may be very unsustainable for most or all of us. But for a short period of time, that could be a good supplement so that you can go to work or you can have a break, and then that the caregiver is going to be there. They offer different services, but generally across the board, they always help with what's called activities of daily living. So assistance with walking and eating and bathing and toileting and those sorts of things. And then some agencies also provide light housekeeping. The caregiver will do a little bit of housekeeping at home. They'll help to serve the meal, but not necessarily cook that meal. They'll help to take the senior outside and go for walks or do a little bit of exercise or stimulus. And so those are some common services. Variably, some will charge you more if they need to give medications. Some will charge more if they even do provide some nursing care. Instead of a certified nurse aide, it may be an actual registered nurse who can come to your home. Taking you out on outings, some agencies will allow the caregiver to transport your loved one to the mall or to the grocery market. Also, even preparing that food, some will do it for a fee. So home care, and I talked about this in the last seminar as we introduced all the services out there. So if you want to watch the recording, you can see that in-depth intro. Home care is a nice service to provide assistance at home, but it is expensive. And then another really great one that I'm a huge fan of and a proponent of is adult daycare programs. These are licensed programs. There's unlicensed community services like at the community centers. You know, they'll have a senior exercise and such. But adult daycare programs can provide you, the family caregiver, a nice break. It can also provide a lot of excellent value. You know, for $70, $80, $90 a day, they give you lunch. They'll do, well, transportation's not there, but they do exercise. They have games, they're singing. It's a lively thing. And it's a really great value because then the senior goes home. They've been fed for lunch, but maybe you can pay a little bit extra for dinner. You can pay a little bit extra to give your loved one a shower. And it's that socialization that I talked about, that companionship that I talked about, that is lacking at home oftentimes. So I'm a huge fan of adult daycare. There's about, well, specifically, I know there's 1,027 spots in our island for adult daycare programs, and they're interspersed throughout the community. But you know, it's really great for a certain demographic of seniors. Some seniors get very overwhelmed by all that stimulation, especially if they're living with dementia. But you can watch the recording. I'm getting into my whole thing about it. You can watch the recording that I have of last seminar about this. And there's some variable services that they'll provide, maybe for a fee, or maybe they don't at all, right? So that's a supplement. Okay, we're gonna switch gears now because I've done a lot of talking and I want to now make this more interactive. So you'll notice in front of you, I don't have it in front of me, but there's 3 handouts today. One is the slides, one is our feedback form, and one is this worksheet that we have. And I'm gonna ask you all to take just 2 to 4 minutes to look at this worksheet of all these risks that I just mentioned. Just find one that really speaks to you at home. It may be for yourself, it may be for your loved one who you're caring for, but take a couple minutes to look at that one risk and write down ideas, anything, ways that you can mitigate that risk, ways that you can cut down on that risk at home.
My name's Dolly, and my husband has Parkinson's disease.
Okay.
And one of the things one of the symptoms is swallowing, and he has choked on some of his supplements and pills that he has to take.
Yes.
So we're looking for we're not automatically taking, buying or having a pill prescribed.
Okay.
Just in the store. Look for gummies instead of a pill to take, because there's a lot of supplements that are horse pills.
Oh, right.
You know.
Okay.
And that has become an issue with us. So we look for gummies. We look for prescriptions that are maybe liquid form or something else, and it's made a significant difference.
Oh, thank you, Dolly. So let me just recap for those of you in the back of the room that Dolly's husband is living with Parkinson's, and one of the risks is the risk of choking while swallowing, and to mitigate that risk, she has found different forms of medication, like they're in gummy form and not these big pills that he may have challenges with swallowing. And that's a very common issue. Even, I mean, for us in care homes, you know, sometimes you can grind medications and whatnot, or sometimes it comes in oral, like a liquid form or that kind of thing. But that's a very important one because at home, many families aren't aware of these other strategies that you can take, especially when it comes to that. Now, sometimes the physicians will say, well, we suggest that you get some thickener or use this or that, but that's good to hear from Dolly. Anyone else about, you know, some sort of risk at home that you're trying to mitigate and you have a strategy that you heard? Yeah. Oh.
I'm a widow.
Yeah, Regina.
In a house.
Okay.
And the risk I have is being alone.
Being alone.
Yes, because if I fall,
yeah,
and I'm far away from the telephone,
yeah,
I just have to scream my head and hopefully my neighbor hears me.
Oh, okay.
But one of the things I have done that should help this risk is I have joined a Mo'ili'ili Community Center, and
Okay.
they have a program there Monday through Friday, except holidays. I need to call every morning, and I have to say, I'm okay. I woke up.
Wow.
Okay, so it's really good and it's free, except you have to belong, you have
To
to
the
join
community
this other
center.
thing. And on weekends, I got it done with my niece, who my favorite niece. She became my favorite niece. She will call me up, make sure I'm all right. And
Yeah.
she always says, Auntie, are you alive?
Oh,
So
yeah.
she makes me laugh already, you know.
Yeah.
And that's the risk of living alone. How do you lessen that risk?
Yeah.
You know, and it's nice because I'm talking to a human being. I'm not talking to a
Yeah.
reporter.
Oh, Rufina,
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that. That's excellent. So to recap, Rufina lives at home, and that is the risk of being alone. What if something happens? Now, Rufina is part of a really very cool program at Mo'ili'ili Community Center, where every morning they check in with you. Or you have to call them and say, I'm alive, I woke up, I had breakfast. I see.
So if I don't call them by a certain time, they'll call my home. If I don't answer, they start calling me.
Yeah, so they check in. So the community center has a program to check in with seniors. You know how many seniors they do this with, or?
I don't know how many.
Okay, yeah. So, but it's to, again, to mitigate the risk that something happened at home. Every day you call them to check in. But you're also saying something important, which is that it provides a little bit of social interaction and companionship. You've also started something like this with your niece. So that's a great example of being able to mitigate the risk, and hopefully that will extend your time at home longer, right?
For 1 or 2 minutes, I speak to the
Okay.
but
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
yeah,
It becomes a little bit of a
they are
chat.
willing to give you that time
Oh,
to
great.
just communicate a little bit.
Great idea. So that's
Yes.
another thing. You know, how can you, and it doesn't have to be the community center. You could establish that with your nieces or nephews or whoever, even a friend. You check in every day. Just quick routine. I mean, that hits so many of those needs I just mentioned here, right? You talk about the need for safety, for companionship. You have a tradition now, you have a routine. Great. Good example, Rufina. Thank you. Other examples of mitigating risk that you have at home. There's all kinds. Okay, yes.
Hi, my name's Heather. I just wanted to add a little bit to that and
Okay.
include neighbors.
Oh,
Be-
neighbor. Oh, yeah,
because
yeah.
we had that in our cul-de-sac, and we would leave the light on outside, and if they saw a light wasn't turned off on our porch, then they would
Oh,
know that something, to check on us.
yeah.
So I think neighbors are an important resource also.
Very cool. Thank you. Thank you for that. The suggestion was also to create a little hui with your neighbors, which hopefully you get along with your neighbors. My neighbor Sharon is here. We get along. Thank you. But you have a routine to leave the light on. I mean, you turn on the light, and if it's not turned off in the morning, then that indicates that something's wrong, right? Oh, wow. What a great idea. I like that. Other ideas for mitigating these risks that we talked about. Anyone experiencing some of these other ones too? But yeah, go introduce yourself. And is this for yourself or for a senior that you're caring for? Or?
Hi, my name's Ryan and live with my aunt. She has Parkinson's.
Okay,
So one of the things we did was get her an iWatch.
an
She
iWatch.
already has an iPhone
Gotcha.
and it has fall detection.
Oh,
So
yeah,
if
right.
that happens, it'll notify anybody you designate as an
Great.
emergency contact. And
Yeah.
you can include 911 on that as well.
Okay, so yeah, pretty
if-
cool. A lot of technology these days, right? And it's amazing. You know, your watch will know, like, I don't know if you had a BM or something. Your watch knows everything about you. And your phone, these things are like watching us. But that's a great example of how we use technology as a tool. Now, one thing I always say is technology is not a replacement for a human when it comes to day-to-day care, but it's a wonderful way to supplement and especially to monitor, be eyes. We at my care home, we use all sorts of sensors that detect if somebody's moving around, or also if they're, we know they're a fall risk. And so there's the, brave new world out there with technology, but there's many of them that have useful functions like that. So thank you, Ryan. Anyone dealing with issues with inconsistent routines or dehydration or lack of support? Anyone want to share anything about that or other mitigations? Yeah, in the back there. Thank you. And if you don't mind just shouting out.
Okay. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah, that's just for the people on Zoom.
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Janelle. I'm a caregiver for my mom. She has Alzheimer's. And one thing that I really suggest to caregivers that, you know, with people with dementia, which is there are a lot, is to have a geriatrician. I have a specialty doctor. She has saved me so many times from when I get burnout, I would call her and cry and say, I can't do this anymore. And then she'll tell me what's going on. And then I tell her, my mom doesn't want to go to daycare. I can't get her out of the house. She's fighting. We're fighting, blah, blah, blah. And then she would say, look, come in. Let's talk about it. And then she would put my mom on a medicine, on a med.
Okay.
And that really worked.
Yeah.
I have no problems with my mom getting her out the house.
Yeah.
But out of the house. But I think everybody knows what a geriatrician is, right? A good one.
Yeah.
And the other thing too is pay attention. Like my mom only likes female doctors. She prefers over a male. Don't ask me why, but who cares? Take that and make sure that if you're seeking, if you can get a female doctor, then get a female doctor because it makes it easy for me to get her into the doctor's office and sit down and she'll feel comfortable. I mean, I don't even have to argue with her about, oh, he's just going to take care. No, she's just comfortable with females. Just do it. I tell people, if she doesn't want a male doctor, sometimes you can't help, but as much as possible, take those cues because it makes your life so much easier.
I love the suggestion.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. So the risk is kind of a family burnout and of not getting along and having, you know, just kind of not knowing what to do in such a high stress, kind of high stakes situation, and being able to rely on somebody with a lot more expertise in this specific field of medicine, in this example, a geriatrician, is really helpful. And so, yeah, for many seniors, transitioning to a geriatrician is super valuable. Some people have worked with their primary care provider, their internist for decades, and they say, oh, well, he knows my needs, or she really has seen all my kids grow up and all this stuff. But geriatricians have a lot of experience and specialized training in that. So I thank you. That's a great way to eliminate burnout. One other example on Zoom here to mitigate family burnout, Vera talks about bringing her mom outside of the home overnight for respite. Respite is like a temporary care. And so what Vera has done is she has found a care home that's willing to take her mom for 1 to 2 days, maybe a week or a night or a month or something, where she can leave her mom at the care home overnight, but she doesn't have to commit to a full month or whatever. And then after, in the morning time, she picks her mom up. That gives her the respite to be able to go out to dinner or be able to do something that she needs to do. And the same thing happens with daycare, as I mentioned, or even something informal like that. Having a break, for even a night or for a day period of time really helps. And that can actually help Vera to extend the time that she can care for her mom at home longer. And Vera is mentioning that her mom lives with dementia too, so it's extra difficult for her to accommodate at home. And maybe just one more strategy there. Oh yes, is it?
If I had wanted to provide some relief for somebody that was caring for Alzheimer's patient, if something like that, is there an organization that keeps a list of that?
Relief? You mean like?
I would just like to volunteer.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's
like for this, I was thinking maybe I should. Oh, sorry.
Sure. No. So the question is, are there organizations that you can get involved with? And there are many of them.
Because I was just thinking maybe I should go over to that woman and ask her. But
okay. And
other than that,
turn right around and speak to the young lady behind you, because she also knows all these organizations. What are all these risks that we have at home that are going to make it difficult and you're not going to meet the needs of yourself or your loved one at home? Because if you're not meeting everything to some degree, then you start to look at decline, right? And sometimes it happens very quickly. Sometimes it's a slow progression, but we want to be able to reduce these risks because they can really wreak havoc in our plan to say, I'm going to stay at home, or I'm going to take care of dad at home for the next care period or this care period. Okay, now sometimes we have to think about moving out, right? It's just not feasible to stay at home. And here's two very common ones that I encounter when I meet families. The first one is that I've kind of packaged it into just saying that it's not a priority and not a care priority. And again, I define care priorities in three ways. One, it's critical to actually do that, to stay at home. Dad's well-being is so tied to living with mom, who's not ready to move out, that if dad separates from mom and we can't move both of them into a facility because they have such different needs, so dad has to stay with mom, and it's so critical because if he moves out, then suddenly he's just going to be lost. He's going to be out of balance. Then maybe that's critical to stay at home. If it can be accomplished safely, a lot of times it can't. These risks that we're talking about can't always be mitigated, and so therefore safety becomes an issue, and maybe it's not affordable, that home care we talked about. So if it's no longer a care priority, that's one big reason why we should look at moving out. And then the second reason is if the activities of daily living, meeting those needs, creates some kind of undue strain and or jeopardizes the future care period. So let me kind of chunk that out. If it's undue strain, we talked about respite, family burnout. That's a strain. If it's a strain on the budget, like suddenly, we have to increase the caregiver hours from 5 hours a day to now 12 hours a day, and that's going to reduce dad's assets by 2 years time or something like that, right? So undue strain just to meet the basic activities of daily living, eating, bathing, walking, toileting, those sorts of things. And or if it jeopardizes the future. Now, I mentioned this in previous seminars, but the more care that somebody needs, typically the more expensive it's going to get. You might need nurses involved, or you might need more caregivers to do a 2-person transfer as opposed to 1-person transfer. So if meeting those activities of daily living at home is going to jeopardize the time that maybe there's another period where we don't have the funds to be in a care facility, then that should also perhaps be a reason to move out, because it's not going to be sustainable. Unless, again, the care period, if you know that you're in the final care period, and the only time we really know that we're in the final care period is sort of like a hospice situation. Oh, but then sometimes people graduate out of hospice. Like I've had, I have somebody in my care home who has been in hospice for like 2 years, and now the organization said, I'm sorry, you've graduated out of hospice. But generally speaking, if you're sort of towards the end, that's the only time you can kind of really count on knowing that this is the final care period. So those are two situations. Oh, and typically if you need supervision overnight or around the clock, Vera came up with a good solution. She sends her mom to respite overnight at a care home 1 to 2 times a month or week. But otherwise, supervision overnight is going to cause burnout for you, or you're going to have to hire a caregiver, and that could be costly. Or if it's 24/7 supervision, right? So that's just not sustainable. I love my little baby, but I cannot care for my little baby 24 hours a day, let alone a full-grown adult, right? So that's a challenge. And these would be two kind of foolproof, that it's really time to move out from home, because otherwise it's either going to be unsustainable or it's going to cause other health issues for the caregivers or the family and that kind of thing. There's many other reasons why or times that you would want to consider moving out. So it's just something to kind of keep in mind. These are like black and white. Now we're going to switch gears because the last topic I wanted to touch on before we conclude is, how do you convince somebody to move out of their home? Now, this is a really popular topic. I mentioned it's the second most common question I get from families who have a loved one at home. And so I know that some of you even came today because you wanted to know this, right? I think I see Scott back there. So well, let's brainstorm. And I'll first start by telling you what some people do. And I'm usually on the receiving end of it because they have their loved one coming to my home. So what others have done in the past? First of all, they use reasoning. They say, Dad, you're not safe at home. It's too challenging. It's too costly, whatever these reasons. And so they use logic, or they try to reason with this person to say it's no longer a possibility. Sometimes that works. Sometimes it doesn't. A lot of times it doesn't actually work. But that's one strategy we've had when people move in. Other strategies are they appeal to something important, like, to that senior. Mom, if you move to the plaza, they have mahjong club every day, right? Like you can, like, what a great thing. Or at, at this care home, they have your neighbor who you've lived with, over the years, and you guys know each other, so you'll be friends, right? You appeal to something that you think is kind of a pull to them, right? It's a positive thing. Generally, this is kind of seen as a negative thing. This is sort of like a positive, aspirational, hey, this is going to be a good thing, right? I don't see that happen that often, but it does work for the right people. Other families will just make up some reason. We're going on a trip. You need to move home. You need to move to this care home temporarily while we're going on this trip. And that trip may actually have happened or will happen, or maybe it's not. This does not always work for people when they, are cognitively intact. But for people who are living with dementia, it's a common strategy, really. And it worked. It can really work. But you have to do it in the right way. And so, very recently, I had somebody who was living with his wife in an assisted living facility, and she couldn't care for him anymore. So we came up with this whole narrative of your wife's going on a trip. You're going to move to this hotel. We're going to be here temporarily. And because he's living with dementia, temporarily, he can't tell the difference between day to day. And so it becomes this narrative that you use. Now, a lot of people feel like, oh, I don't want to be lying to my mom or dad. Think of it, somebody introduced this term to me. She called it a therapeutic fib. It's for their well-being. And it's true, okay? And, dementia experts will tell you that, like, there's no shame in coming up with these, I don't want to call them lies, but they're narratives that will encourage somebody. And there's a lot of research out there about dementia care that you can rely on how to make that transition. Because a lot of times for dementia care, it's more damaging to come out with the truth than it is, something that's a positive narrative. Maybe you, in fact, just create some reason that home is no longer an option. Like, we have to go, repaint the walls, or we're going to go do this. I don't recommend it, but some families really just do a surprise, like cold turkey. You rip the Band-Aid off. And for some seniors, living with dementia, that's how it feels, because they may not know, or even if they've been told in advance, you're moving out tomorrow, that it's just too challenging, right? So they'll be just kind of immediately relocated. And then there's like care homes like ours, we have to kind of pick up the pieces as they move in. Other options are to test the waters, like you start to go out. We just talked about it. Vera sends her mom to respite care once or twice a month or a week. Adult daycare is another way to kind of feel it out and test the waters. The goal is for seniors who are really don't want to leave the home to start to be used to a different environment where there's new faces, where there's a different routine, that there's different traditions and companionship, right? And so that's sort of an easy, smoother landing. I think if I were to send this list to my kids, I would say, please do this one, unless I'm really giving you a hard time. And so there's a lot of ways, joining a community center, a lot of ways that we can sort of try to extract our connection, or not extract it, but really kind of help the senior to think of new spaces beyond just staying at home. And unfortunately, some families do the last one too. they wait until mom falls or has some health issue or whatever the reason, and they can no longer stay because they've now been, taken to the ER, and then they go to the hospital and rehab, and now they say it's no longer an option to stay at home. But despite all these challenges, sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. And even if a senior is really looking forward to moving out, it can still be a difficult transition because of all those things we talked about. Home's familiar, but moving out of home is a difficult or very scary thing for some people. So we're going to go back to this fun exercise and help me fill in this blank here. A house is made of walls and beams. A home is built with love and dreams. Well, that sounds really lovely, right? Okay, so we got, yes, these are corny. You're gonna get a lot more corny here, but that's an important distinction. What's a house versus a home? Okay, this is kind of the same. A house is made of wood and stone, but only love can make a home, right? So it's the love. What is it? What is a home, really? Is it the four walls, or is it the love? Okay. Home is what you take with you, not what you leave behind. Now that's when I read that first, I was like, oh gosh, well, that's kind of true. But seniors have my grandparents on my other side had a very different relationship to their belongings and their stuff than my generation does. In my generation, this is like so many things to me. This is my like house and home here. But for my grandfather on the other side, they had a lot of things in their home that meant, had meaning, and all of these anecdotes and memories associated with it. My grandmother, who we're talking about, like her home looked like kind of like a museum or like a curio shop of like things that she picked up in travel, right? And I follow this auction website here locally where they have, businesses that close or people that are selling things at auction. And a lot of times there's estate sales. And these estate sales have, it looks like, collectors' belongings or house in, Aleva Heights or whatnot. And there's a lot of stuff that is of a certain generation, of that time period where things were harder to obtain, or they didn't have this mass production of items, and therefore like all of that stuff became like a part of their home. But really, if we follow this, which I think there's some wisdom to it, that is not really home. That's just stuff, right? It's what you take away. And the last one is home isn't a place, it's a feeling, right? Now, again, we may be in corny zone here or a little overly sentimental, but use this as some guidelines. This is from poets or philosophers or all of that kind of stuff. But use this as a guideline to think. If you're trying to remove somebody from their home and what they consider to be their identity, their space that is so tied to their well-being, then it's important to try to think of other things that would appeal to them. This was my grandmother's kitchen. Objectively speaking, it's dated, it's a little messy, it's past its prime. I look at this though, and I say, gosh, that brings up so many memories. That's home for me in a lot of ways. It's not my home, but it brings up feelings of home, all the great interactions there. I had a lot of great food there, just sitting there. And like that was like the center of the universe for our family. This doesn't exist anymore. This kitchen is now somebody else's kitchen, but the memory of it is still home to me, right? And it will always be, but it doesn't mean that that space, that venue the feeling of that space and that venue cannot be then replicated in some other space and venue. And that's your goal as you're trying to convince somebody to move out of the house, is that home is all these fun things. It's the feeling, it's the love, it's the connection, and not that one space that you have, right? So here's some of the things that, the word home really means. And it's not for everybody. You may pick and choose, but generally speaking, the word home really refers to these nice qualities of comfort, maybe of innocence, in their youth, being optimistic when life was, beginning, the flexibility that now I'm not having to follow all these rules, the community and the traditions that I mentioned. The last three are hugely important, right? Home to them in all of our minds really represents sort of a part of our identity. It represents our life before loss, especially for seniors as they get older and older and older. There's just, it's well known that there's many losses that occur through life, right? Not just losing loved ones, but losing independence, losing all these other things. I'm going to talk about that. And that's what is truly kind of at stake here when you're trying to convince somebody that they have to move out of their house, right? By the time we're even talking about moving out of home, many of these things, these qualities have already been lost through the course of their life. And so therefore, it's refusing to move out of home is an attempt to grasp onto whatever's left. And that's really a challenge for seniors. I have to say, I'm speaking from as a 40-some-year-old. I've never been in that situation myself, but I can see how, just in my younger life, 40-some years, how the accumulation of loss, of change that is out of control can really lead to somebody feeling like a need to have some stability, some consistency, right? And so to a lot of seniors, moving out can represent any one of these things and more, including but not limited to loss of control, right? Loss of their identity, loss of familiar surroundings, loss of their community, right? It's just like somebody in their 90s or 80s or 90s, we've already experienced so much loss of this, that the idea of being uprooted from the space that we've built our identity around and whatnot can feel really difficult. The other thing that it really scares a lot of seniors at times is relying on others, depending on others for just basic things like getting out of the chair or even being fed or having to use the bathroom, right? And so moving out can mean a loss, a huge loss, and a continuation of something that's out of control to them, right? So moving out also can be an opportunity. And, you tell this to a senior, they're going to be like, forget that opportunity. I want to be at home. However, let's kind of go through this, right? Moving out is an opportunity to create new traditions that are actually serving them better. Some traditions that seniors may hold on to in the home space as they age are no longer really available. And therefore, they're just kind of clinging on to something that doesn't exist anymore. Or traditions that are still occurring, like the family parties or whatever, are still there, but they're not able to participate in those traditions because it's too overwhelming or because of physical needs or whatever the reason, or physical, incapacity. And so the opportunity to create new traditions can't happen without moving out of that space where we're just kind of set in our ways with the old traditions. In a way, they may be surprised to hear, but it can also really create a feeling of independence. And the feeling of independence is by simplifying, right? The flexibility that I mentioned at home, that ultimate flexibility that you have to structure your day, that you have to make the routine, to tell the caregivers what to do, in a way that can become like a overwhelming prison for a lot of seniors. They end up with decision fatigue, right? When you have so many decisions that you make, then people actually get tired of making decisions. And at home, when you have just a blank slate, what are you going to do today? What are you going to eat today? How are you going to stimulate yourself or exercise or whatever? That blank slate can be overwhelming for a lot of seniors. And so they actually feel like they aren't so independent because they're overwhelmed. They don't have that simplicity. And so moving out is an opportunity to create simplicity for them so that they have agency to make their own decisions and not have to rely on others. And so it's a kind of a reverse way of thinking, but you can actually make them feel more independent. I think the third point here is related, which is that they can feel like they have that agency and that power to like, you know, own the day. And again, if I have a blank slate, I got to do all these things plus clean the house, or, you know, my husband is saying, well, why isn't dinner prepared yet? And I have like physical limitations or whatever, that can be very burdensome and I might feel like I'm failing. Whereas by moving out into an environment where it's simpler, there's far fewer decisions to make, you can feel like winning. This summer, I took my 2 young kids on vacation. Never done that before. I don't recommend taking 2 young children on an airplane on vacation, but we went on a cruise ship. And I've never been on a cruise ship before. And I've always been kind of like, oh, I don't want to be stuck on this cruise ship with all these other people and I can't get off the boat. And I loved it. Oh my gosh, it was so amazing. I was winning every day because my decision, okay, am I going to wake up? What am I going to eat? What of these 3 activities are we going to do? And my kids won't tell me, no, I'd rather do this instead, right? That's the menu. There's 1, 2, 3 options, right? That simplicity can be empowering in a lot of ways because then you feel like you're actually, you know, have some control. When there's a blank slate with unlimited flexibility, then we feel out of control sometimes because we can't manage all of it in our minds or actually get it done. So that's a huge one. And then not being a burden to somebody else. You know, this is my parents say this about me and I mean about themselves. And I think that's part of the reason why they built a care home, so that they are not a burden to us. They just say, stick us in the care home. And that's my plan, is to stick them in the care home. But not being a burden to one's kids is a thing, right? Not everybody. Some people are very dependent on their kids and they have that relationship. But a lot of seniors will feel guilty about that, or they feel like, again, they may not have purpose. And therefore, they're just kind of existing and being a drag to their loved ones. And so these are opportunities to happen when somebody can think about moving out, or when you actually move out. The goal is to recreate all this good stuff in your plan. And then when you appeal to somebody, hopefully you can convey to them that I know that this is all the association you have to that space you're in now. And this is what it means. You're afraid that these are things are going to happen, but we're going to do something else. So an example I have in my care home in terms of new traditions, you know, I have a family that moved both parents into the care home. And now one of their traditions, it happens like 4 days a week. They come and they play mahjong together. That's kind of an old tradition. But it's a new tradition that they come into our space and do it. And they are maintaining this old tradition that they have in a new way, in a new space, so that their parents don't feel like, oh, well, my kids left me here, right? They dumped me in this place, right? And it has nothing to do with them being at home. Where they play mahjong is just I mean, not where they do it, it's actually getting it done, and playing mahjong is the most important thing for them. Other families create new traditions by having like a set outing per week where they'll say, okay, well, I know you're moving out, but here every Monday, we're going to go to this place, right? And so what could you do to create these feelings that we talked about, these wonderful feelings for your senior, such that they don't associate it just with the 4 walls that they're in only, that they can think of this life beyond that, right? And so we're going to do another collective brainstorming. And if you look at that one sheet I have, if you flip the page over, there's another side to it about recreating feelings of home. Now, like we did for the first side, just pick one that speaks to you, because you can do the rest on your own time. But pick one of these feelings or one of these things about the idea of home, and then write down some strategies of what can you do for your loved one to recreate that, not in the space that they're normally in. And then we're gonna come together again. You can share with your neighbors, and then you can. I love to hear from some of you. So let's do that. Take just a couple minutes, and then we'll come together again. So let's hear from each other. Can we? Any ideas in terms of recreating these qualities that will hopefully lead to somebody feeling more comfortable outside of home, and/or strategies to get them out of home? Okay, Nicole. Oh, sorry, behind you.
I've seen a lot of information on providing music
Music.
as a way to help people with dementia.
Yeah.
And it helps them to recover their memories and feel good about the different levels of
Absolutely.
care.
Okay, thank you. So Nicole had mentioned about something that's a concept called music therapy, and there's actually music therapists out there. There's not a license for Hawaii, but they're working on that. And music therapy is a very powerful tool, just even just music generally, a powerful tool to evoke old memories, and especially, you know, positive ones. And so the goal would be using music in that new space, and or maybe when you're breaking the news that you're going to have to move out, Dad, to use music to be calming as a calming force and tool, so that the thought of moving out, the process of moving out, and actually being in a new space can be alleviated with something that's going to be calming and bring back old memories. But that in particular is a great way to bring somebody back. And I forgot to mention, I think, that all dementia care experts will say when a person living with dementia says, I want to go home, which happens a lot, they don't mean I want to go home. They could be sitting in their home and saying, I want to go home. Rather, it's I want to feel comfortable. I'm feeling some kind of discomfort, like I'm in pain, I'm hungry, I'm thirsty. They can't vocalize that. And or sometimes they say, I want to go home back to a time when I was younger, back to a time when I felt more confident, or I felt comfortable, or when I was youthful. And so music is a direct, like, super highway back to those old memories, because the part of the brain that music resides in isn't affected by dementia as much as memories. So thank you, Nicole. Other strategies to, oh yeah, thank you. Oh, good, yeah.
And so I thought that just show the person how they can help you. So if they knew a craft or a recipe or something like that, and you can say, you know, my class needs to learn how to make these leis. And I remember you know, so just trying to let them see that they can still help you.
Right.
So that, you know, just kind of shift it. So it's not like we were always helping them, but they're also helping you.
Right.
So they can feel more of a feeling of self-worth. And then the other I tackled was predictable routine. And I thought, if they can help you build their own routine, so you can have a bare skeleton and say, hey, okay, so what do you think about this? And if we do this, do you have any ideas that we can use to help? And then that might make them feel a little bit more independent, like they are helping you. So you've put the bare bones of what needs to occur, but then they can maybe help you with what can be shifted to make them feel more comfortable, and that you can remind them, like, you helped me with this routine. Do you remember?
Yeah.
You said this would be da 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 da. How do you still feel about, you know, and kind of still have a shared partnership as much as possible. But then you begin with what still needs to occur, but yet try to bring as much as possible in what, you know, what you can still do with them of what still must occur.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing those two strategies. I mean, I think that works even when you're not looking at having to move out too. I mean, these are great ideas while somebody is still at home to extend their time at home. But when you're looking at the worry about, you know, or their worries about leaving, you can create something new, right? And you can hopefully even tie it in your narrative to, it's not possible to do at home. We have to do it somewhere else. That it would be a great thing. Because again, if we're talking about the feeling of loss and all these things, that feeling of you know, all those positive feelings that we have here, it like oftentimes this isn't happening now at home. And so if you can kind of have something to look forward to at the point they move out of home, then you could use that as a way to convince them that in a new space, it's possible to get these things when right now at home, because of the stairwell or because nobody's there to care for you or because it's too expensive, we aren't able to do these things. So that's a great thing there. Yeah, thank you so much. Other strategies that you've discussed or can share with each other? Yeah, Joanne. Okay. Yeah.
He has activities, he's got friends.
Mm-hmm.
The staff is exceptionally open to them,
Yeah.
and I appreciate them so much.
Oh, thank
I
you.
know how hard they work.
Yeah.
So daycare, I think, is an excellent for during the day, because I
Yeah.
go to work, I come home,
Yeah.
and at least I know he's been taken care of.
Yeah.
And
that routine. So the example is daycare, using that routine. And you know, we should say it doesn't have to be a licensed program. Now it's helpful if it is a licensed daycare program, but even if it's not a licensed daycare program, having that routine of getting out of the house and getting used to a new space will empower you, and it sounds like your husband, to be able to transition into another space down the road, because you're already having that habit. So I'm a huge fan of daycare, and it gives you the respite that you need, right?
And they have extra things, you know, this is a licensed one, and so they have nurse on staff.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm totally comfortable with that. They
Great.
have a social worker on
Yeah,
staff.
yeah.
So if I need to talk to someone, and you can pay a little extra and have dinner to take home. So, and they can give him a shower. And it's a big help. It's just a big help.
Thank you for sharing that. That's a great strategy. And again, like, you know, some of you might not be appropriate for one reason or another, but for many seniors, it's just getting over that hump and being able to try to convince them to recreate some of these things. And you're a testimony to that, recreating some of these things that they may have felt they've lost. I don't want to pick on you, Scott, but you've shared some situation with me that I wanted to kind of just bring to the fore, and maybe some of you else could share. But Scott's in a situation where it's not his parent or something, but it's an auntie. And auntie lives with another auntie and their sisters, and they are for so long they've lived together. It sounds like they didn't have kids and they weren't married, so they support each other. And that's something that if one auntie has to move out, then suddenly the identity of both of them changes, right? And it's a scary thing. That's the feeling of loss of that identity for both aunties. And therefore, being able to recreate that connection in a new space requires just a little bit of like brainstorming. Okay, well, how can we get aunties to be together in whatever new space that one auntie has to be in, you know, outside of home, the other can visit or can spend time, you know, or maybe, you know, eventually they could even think about moving together because both aunties are like in their 90s or something, if I recall, right? And so for both of them, they have this strong desire to be together, to return to that feeling of identity and community that they've had, but it's no longer a possibility for them for one reason or another. And we won't get into specifics there, but because that's so tied to them, when you're going through your list here, you know, try to really pick apart which one of these really is most important for your senior that is like a blockage to them, to thinking about moving out, because that's the one that you want to focus on. And in Scott's situation, I'm pretty, you know, confident that it sounds like it's because both aunties need to, that's their identity. They want to be together, and it doesn't feel like a possibility if one moves out of the house. But all of this other stuff about, you know, it being the four walls and the space that they're in has nothing to do with that feeling of community. They don't have to be living together to have that same feeling. They just need to have some supplement or some opportunities to still be together during the day or whatever it is, you know. And like at my care home, we don't even have, we have couples in my care home. And sometimes it's better that both couples are in separate floors because they just don't want to be that close to each other, right? And not because they don't love each other or because it's a challenge, but it's just a challenge. And because they know that they're still in the same vicinity such that they feel good enough. It's not living together in the same floor or the same room, and a lot of seniors don't even live in sleep in the same bedroom anymore, right? Because it's like, one snores, one is, and so they still in our home still feel like they're together, but they're not on they're not on the same floor. They're in completely separate areas. And so how can you recreate some of those feelings? So for Scott, we've talked about this before, and I think that's the one blockage that you got to break, is convincing both aunties, and maybe even the one that doesn't need to move out, that you can recreate this identity that you have and maintain it, even though it's not in the same house, really. Any other strategies? I want to be respectful of our time. We've actually gone much longer than we normally do, but this is really a great conversation. Any other strategies? Okay, one last one. Oh yeah, okay. Oh, you have a problem? Okay, well, hopefully we can be in solution mode here.
Because he has dementia.
Yes. You are your husband's home because he has dementia.
So
Okay.
he always has to be with me?
Yes. Yeah. Okay, so this is a common thing. And sorry, what was your name?
Lurleen.
Lurleen is her husband's home because her husband is living with dementia and he relies on you. You live together at home, I'm assuming. And Lurleen does everything for your husband. Now, there's a couple of things to think about here, but one of them is we don't want you to decline. We don't want you to have caregiver burnout. And there's all these studies about how family members sometimes even pass before the person that they're caring for when it comes to dementia, or even just senior care generally. But in Lurleen's case, I think one of the things that you might want to have to try to overcome, and it's a very common one, so don't feel like it's you're alone in this, but a lot of times family members try to wear two hats. You're trying to wear the loving spouse hat and the caregiver hat, and they're two very separate jobs. In my care home, we take care of the caregiver hat. We wear the caregiver hat and we do all the nitty-gritty things, the day-to-day, the establishing the routines, having the interactions, all of those things. And we're very good at it. We're not good at, and we cannot replicate your role as the spouse. And so maybe the first thing is to start separating out those two hats that you're wearing, because you have a very specific strength and job that nobody else can do for your husband. But all the other stuff, the caregiving, the feeding, the bathing, all of those things that you may have to wake up in the middle of the night for can be given to somebody else perhaps. If, everyone's situation is different. But that's one of the first steps for you to start thinking about him being in a different space and him accepting other people. Because the more that you help him, the more he's going to continue to rely on you, right? So it's a very common thing for Lurleen and for others that you like, and not just dementia. Generally speaking, families have a much harder time caring for family members than the professional caregivers because of all the history, because of the spousal expectations or the expectations generally, because of all the traditions. And so that would be my suggestion, break those two roles apart and start to offset so that you don't burn out. And it actually can be empowering for you. People that move to my care home, sometimes their kids will say, oh gosh, now I can just come and enjoy my dad. I don't have to think about like convincing him to drink water and all these things that we were kind of snipping at each other and he gets upset with me. Now I can just focus on dad and being together and having a good time, and it repairs a relationship, which ultimately in this is generally the most important thing, is the relationship. So that would be a start. My website has a lot of information about that too, and it's a common one. But I want to be respectful of time. So in summary, staying at home is so familiar. It's what a lot of people want. It represents flexibility and independence and identity. But it can become debilitating for a lot of people, if not already. And so when you are looking towards the future, you have to think about what is being lost by staying at home and what is being deteriorated, and having the lost opportunity to create a new life that either, even if it doesn't happen now or has to happen now, is holding somebody back in the past, or they're clinging on to something that's going to get harder and harder for them, right? So we want to, and my suggestion is always to look at modifying routines and traditions while you're at home. And then once somebody's out of home, then to continue those new traditions outside of the home. So I know we went very far beyond our time here, and I really appreciate you sticking through with me. I have some of these things, especially for those of you online, you can download these things, but there's one form that I left here, that you were given here, and that's the feedback form. Now, this is the last seminar of this year, and if you could just fill out this feedback form so that I can send it to, I don't send the form itself, I just kind of gather all the comments together for the Elderly Affairs Division, so that hopefully they'll continue this with us next year, and they want to see that it's worth their while. And if you'd like to just even leave a note or comment that hey, please continue it on next year, or also for other families who may be going through this for the first time, I encourage you, please, if you could just leave some thoughts. And also for me, just to make the seminars better, especially because as I'm hopefully preparing for 2024, I want to know the topics that you might want to have additional seminars about. But this seminar and the previous seminars, the recordings, this seminar will have the recording online in the coming days. And the other 4 seminars that I did as part of this series are already on the website that many of you use to register. So I just want to thank you for joining me. I want to thank my best students here who have come to every session. And for those of you who this is your first one, there's a lot more information available and resources for you. So don't feel like you're alone. I love that we have people that have met each other and we're creating this community together, because that's really the key to being able to weather this and not have to reinvent the wheel when you're coming to senior care. It's using those wheels to get where you want to go. So thank you for joining me, and I hope you have a great rest of your weekend, and thank you for those of you on Zoom. Thank you.